By the way, the Majestic documents state that they got what they describe as ICs. So the Majestic documents in Corso...
Integrated circuits, when you say ICs.
Yeah,
right?
integrated circuits, exactly. And Corso said that they had discussed in the military, they were scared of ICs. They were like, if we unleash this technology, what's going to happen? Are they going to put these things in our brains? They were concerned about brain-computer interfaces, BCIs. They were really worried about that. And they were like, oh, this is scary technology. Remember, vacuum tubes were like high-tech in the 50s, you know?
Welcome. I'm here with Rich Geldreich. Rich, welcome back, man.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
All right. So what are we talking about today?
Okay. So I didn't have this plan. This has evolved organically over time. So during Christmas holiday, I was browsing late at night and I was just randomly just looking stuff up, and I'm about ready to go to sleep. And I noticed I was just looking at all my tabs, and then I clicked the one tab on archive.org, and I noticed, wait a second, Atomic Energy Act, Detlev Bronk. I recognize that name. That's MJ12. What is this? And then I looked at the page, and I'm like, it said Atomic Energy Act applicant. I'm like, well, why not just search for that on archive.org and also the CIA reading room, etc. And boom, a whole bunch of stuff pops up. So what this presentation is about is a cluster of security clearances that many famous and well-known UAP figures actually have.
All right. Well, let's go through it.
Yeah, cool. All right, so let me maximize this. Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to talk too long at the beginning for you there, Sean. Okay, so Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso, kind of a famous figure who came out in the mid to late 90s, around 97. And he came out with this book called The Day After Roswell, which is co-authored with William J. Burns. And so Corso was a Pentagon, it says here, a Pentagon official. He was on the National Security Council Operations Coordinating Board, or the OCB. And he's a controversial figure. And I noticed recently that his Wikipedia page was deleted, and the book Wikipedia page was removed. And I'm like, okay, well, not removed, sorry, was defaced, was all messed up. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Because I remember when Corso came out, and, I've listened to Corso and I've transcribed what he said. It's on my Medium. And so I want to know what really is the deal with Corso. And so real fast, what this book talks about is some of his experiences at Fort Riley during the Roswell incident, or right after, where he saw an occupant, and then years later, his experiences on the National Security Council, and then in the U.S. Army Foreign Technology Branch, where he saw and was involved in distributing retrieved materials to U.S. industry. And so this is a pretty well-known book. And the problem we have here is that very few people have actually sat down and done real research on Corso. And so first, we do have his service record, and the Black Vault, John Greenwald Jr. did a great job in around 1998 to get his DA Form 66. And we have a chain of custody on that. We can clearly see it came from the U.S. Army. I have it in the slides. The problem with that is nobody sat down and actually corroborated against other, databases and microfilm. So I've done that work. It's on my Medium, and I'm going to show a little bit of that here. Nobody sat down to actually prove he was on the NSC's OCB. So the OCB was part of the National Security Council's machinery in the early to mid late 50s. It was within the NSC, but it wasn't on the NSC. It's just this kind of complex relationship, but it is part of the NSC, and the newspaper articles from the era back that up, and I'll have that on here. And if you actually sit down and look for Corso's database footprint, microfilm footprint, you'll find that there's congressional testimony, newspaper articles proving that he was at and you got to forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, the Panmunjom Truce Conference in Korea in 53. There's articles showing for sure he was there by full name. They were from Catholic media. And his DA Form 66, we can confirm, you just go down to 66 and we can confirm, here's Army orders and newspapers. He was assigned here. He was moved there. These are from official U.S. Army articles.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
Okay. So here's the official CIA.gov URL that I'm pulling from here. You can go ahead and, put these slides on archive.org after this airs, and you can go look at it yourself or go to my Medium blog. But I found several things on CIA.gov's reading room. This is a perfect chain of custody, meaning it doesn't go through archive.org. It's not some weird, PDF found randomly. It's the real thing. And it says to Dr. H.S. Craig, I believe, remember correctly, that's the Joint Chiefs of Staff guy, from Lieutenant Colonel P.J. Corso, PJC. He had his initials there. And P.J. Corso was how he's referenced in several U.S. Army newspaper announcements, official ones. And there's many hits for P.J. Corso that are definitely him, because those hits corroborate his DA Form 66. So in this thing on the right here, as the first page of this national, it says at the bottom, NSC declassification/release instructions on file. It was approved for release a few years after he died. And at the top, it says in the text, during my stay in Rome, that's Corso. He could speak Italian. He was stationed in Rome during World War II. He was in charge of the Rome Allied Area Command, actually, according to other newspaper articles. So he was also interacting with the Pope at the time. So he was a big guy in World War II in Rome. During my stay in Rome, Prime Minister De Gasperi and his ministers cautioned me repeatedly not to use opinions or activities in Rome as a yardstick for the remainder of Italy. This is our guy. And this is the first page on the left and the second page on the right. And if you look at the very bottom on the right left, it says OCB-SPS-PJ Corso. And this is part of the National Security Council's declassification release. So this is an official CIA.gov link. It's rock solid. We have a chain of custody. There's more, too. This is just the first one that I found.
When was this released?
This was released in 2000. At the very bottom left, you can see approved for release 2000/08/30.
Okay.
So now this is like, a 25-ish year old document. But the problem is, and this includes me, I did not look for P.J. Corso. I always was looking, when I was searching, for Philip J. Corso or Philip Corso. I didn't think they'd look for a military. What would appear on his chest? P.J. Corso. I didn't think to look for that. This is the first time I actually had to do that. And the reason I searched for it is because I kept finding these newspaper articles where he was referred to as P.J. Corso. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look for that. And then I found an archive.org link, which led to the CIA.gov link. And then once I had the CIA.gov link, I'm like, boom, we're in. This is not fake. This is real. Okay, there's another document, P.J. Corso, same dude, to Dr. H.S. Craig, Joint Chiefs of Staff. This was approved for release a few months earlier in 2000. This is our guy. Okay, and so what this shows is that Lieutenant Colonel Corso was at the highest levels of the U.S. government, that just like he said he was. Okay, so if you're doubting that this is the same gentleman, here's an example. This particular article appears approximately 50 places, was repeated over and over throughout the country. So Lieutenant Colonel P.J. Corso, Inspector General for the 7th Army Support Command, said his office was investigating a complaint from one of the soldiers. This is echoed all over the microfilm. So if you go look at the dates, March 7th, 1960, if you go compare that to his DA Form 66, he was the Inspector General, 7th Army. And by the way, we have a chain of custody on this as well. This is from the Black Vault. That was FOIA'd. We have the FOIA paperwork at the very beginning. This is John Greenwald Jr. So you see what I'm doing here. We've now triangulated Corso. How
long was this guy a lieutenant colonel?
He was a lieutenant colonel approximately from 52-ish to when he left around 1961, 60. Here's the deal. Like him and a lot of other people, here's the problem with Corso is that he wasn't making enough money. And so he eventually had to leave the army and go in the industry just to get ahead. And he was held behind. He was stuck as a lieutenant colonel for all this time. And there's something you need to understand. There's a history here that very few people have dug into. Corso was involved in some high-level matters at the National Security Council level or OCB level. He was a witness to certain things related to the Korean War and how prisoners of war were treated. So apparently hundreds of U.S. soldiers were left behind in the Soviet Union after the Korean War. And Eisenhower knew about it. Corso was involved in that. Congress started to sniff around. And Corso, perhaps his mistake, or you could say this was a good thing. Corso was willing to testify and during the Kennedy administration. And that was a big no-no. It looked like to me that, and keep in mind, he was willing to testify about other things. I'm just giving you an overall picture of Corso. In the early 90s, he came.
That's career suicide.
Yeah, in the early 90s, it came out that the Korean War, soldiers left behind in the Soviet Union. It came out in Congress. I think it was in the Senate, and Senate intelligence verified it. Corso was brought in again to testify. So you notice there's a pattern here. Early 60s, he testified. Early 90s, he testified. So he bucked the system. And because of that, his career suffered. That's my impression. And by the way, if you listen to Corso and his Art Bell interviews, I've transcribed them. I've manually checked every word. He says that he bucked the system, but I think he did it for good reasons. He saw personally, like he actually said he witnessed soldiers coming during the peace or truce conference, right, in Korea. He would see these soldiers coming from the Soviet Union. They were brutalized. Yeah, they were tortured, and it just haunted him. And so he's like, I can't stay quiet. I can't cover this up. Okay, so this is an example from 56. So I'm just giving you an idea. Here's the kind of corroboration I'm finding in the microfilm. So official U.S. Army orders, usually I find these in Missouri or Oklahoma newspapers for some reason. And the military is just saying, hey, we're moving this person from here to there, or they're going to go here. And they use these acronyms, right? And so if you see here down the bottom of this highlighted part, it says Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso, Army SP OPR Coordination BD, Washington, D.C. to Fort Bliss, Texas. Well, you can see the date, which is October 3rd, 56. And if you go to his DA Form 66, it all syncs up. I point that out here, but I just want to point out my mistake in my research was when I saw this, I saw OPR Coordination BD. I immediately thought building. I'm like, oh, it's a building. No, that's board. So that's his OCB placement to Fort Bliss. So this also corroborates the CIA.gov document. So here we have, by the way, this is repeated all over the newspapers. We're triangulating.
What is that? Special operations?
No, that's what I thought it was too. I thought that was Special Operations Coordination Building or something.
Well, special ops,
it's not special ops. He wasn't involved in special ops. I forget what SP. I did have it figured out. I'm sorry.
Well, they also at this time in history, Delta didn't exist. Army Special Forces. Well, Army Special Forces 56. Didn't exist.
Yeah, I at first thought it meant, Special Operations, but no. That's Operations Coordination Board in Washington. Yeah, this was his previous posting to Fort Bliss. Now, if you go to the next page here, next slide. Here's his DA Form 66. We have a chain of custody for this. If you look at the date of this is October 3rd, 56. So if you go and just look, on the 20th of October 56, casual, en route to Fort Bliss, Texas. Previously, intelligence staff, Army something or other, can't really read that very well, OPR coordinating BD. Now, it gets really interesting if you, and I showed this on my blog, if you search for the quoted phrase OPR space coordination space BD throughout the entire newspapers.com database of like literally a billion pages. There's only one man in history who shows up for that specific phrase. It's Lieutenant Colonel Corso. It's pretty amazing. It's like a key right to Corso.
By the way, Fort Bliss is like right across the border from New Mexico and White Sands Missile Base, right?
He was at Red Canyon. He was stationed at Red Canyon. It's on his DA Form 66, and he talks about it in his interviews. He was there. He was in charge at White Sands. And the Red Canyon's long gone, but at the time, it was like there was a outpost there or whatever. So, yeah. And so the document chain of custody, so you're not looking at BS. It goes through the Black Vault, the individual who runs that, a well-known person by the name of John Greenwald Jr. It might be one of his first FOIAs, actually. And it's a full chain of custody to the Department of Army, U.S. Army Reserve Personnel Command. So this is rock solid. We have triangulated Corso through his DA-66, microfilm hits, CIA.gov links. Like, this guy is real in the sense that he was there. Like 70% or more of his DA Form 66, I can corroborate just through newspaper Army orders. So, and I have this on my Medium. I have a full breakdown. Also, another thing I want to point out, is that Corso said he was at Fort Riley during Roswell, early to mid-July 1947. That's actually backed up with a magazine finding where there's a film magazine, I have it on my Medium. He somehow was interacting with his brother, who was also in the films, like professionally in films, film gear and things like that. Corso used to work at some kind of theater before World War II. Anyway, yeah, he was in the United States visiting from Europe right before Roswell. It's provable. Okay. And so what is the OCB? That's my next question. Okay. We know he was on the OCB. He wasn't in the National Security Council directly, right? He was right beneath them. OCB. It was part or within the National Security Council. And so I found 2 articles here, and I have links to them in the presentation. So the left one says President Eisenhower established it in an executive order. I think this was 53, establishing an operations coordinating board within the NSC. And on the right, it says, and that, by the way, on the left, it says that it's essentially within the NSC. And within the National Security Council. On the right, it's a little bit later, about a year later. Although not specifically a part of the National Security Council, the Operations Coordinating Board is an integral part of the National Security Council machinery for formulating and implementing the policies of the government relating to national security. And that was a very big article about an Air Force fellow, I think. So, and I have links to all this, and you can go read it yourself. But this is part of history. I like to go back to primary sources. I don't trust Wikipedia anymore. The mobs are just going crazy on that platform now. You cannot trust.
Yeah, Wikipedia is just a propaganda arm. It's a narrative. It's a narrative shaping arm of the government, basically.
It's not trustworthy, especially for this kind of research. So I'm going back to primary source now, and they're only one click away. It's not like it was 10 or 20 or 30 years ago where I would have had to actually go to a library or an archive physically looking through microfilm, right? We don't do that. We can just search this quickly. Okay. So this is, I think, my final slide on Corso here. So I keep finding articles from the 70s, 60s about written by, or not written by, more like about Corso. And yeah, he spoke fluent Italian. He met with the Pope several times. He said that the Pope just stuck to business. There were discussions about, so apparently Nazis were being given passports. Hey, yeah.
You got a misspelling here.
These are fresh slides. Where's the misspelling?
First bullet. Instead of fluent, you had flaunt.
All right, sorry.
No, I'm not doing that to expose you. I'm just
we'll fix it right now.
Yeah, so if you show it again in front of like a serious audience, not
we got it. Hey, these are brand new. Listen, I've been working like crazy to get this information to everybody.
No, look, it's great. It's great. It's better to have it fast than have it perfect. But if you're at like Contact in the Desert again, presenting.
Yeah, I would have caught that.
This is not a professional operation here. This is, this is
a rush job. All right, I admit it's a rush job, man. Hey, and newspapers, that would have been fine, though. They wouldn't have redone the hot lead for that one misspelling. But anyway, yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah, I hate misspelling. So, yeah, he met with the Pope. The Pope was handing out, what Corso said was that the Pope was handing out to Nazis at the end of World War II passports. And Corso didn't like that. He's like, what the hell are you doing? What's going on? And then he said, well, wait a second. Some of these individuals were giving us hints secretly before the Gestapo raids would happen and things like that. And they actually saved American soldiers. And so they let them go. Can you
pop the slides back up?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Of course, we got to share that. It's not a professional operation. We're winging this.
Yeah, I'm not talking about. I'm talking the whole thing. Like me too. This is not a professional operation. This is,
Okay, hold on. Stand by. There we go. I got to click 3,000 buttons to get that up. Okay, can you see it?
And then you got to. Yeah, there you go.
I fixed Fluid. I fixed it. Okay. Yeah, he was the chief intel officer.
No.
What?
You did.
Did I mess up Fluid again?
It's an E. An E, not an A.
All right, now I gotta click a million buttons again, but I have.
That's all right. We'll get it right. So
I put these slides together.
When you go big time on Jesse Michaels, you'll have all this stuff spelled right. You'll be all right. When you go big time,
I don't know if
you'll get it right for Rogan. We'll be good.
Oh my God. I apologize to everybody. Maybe Sean will edit it out. I don't know. Can you see it?
Maybe not. I think this is entertaining.
I don't know if you can see it yet. Hold on.
Oh, you took out Fluent.
I just took it out. I don't feel like figuring that out. I'll put it in later.
All right, you got to put it in presentation mode, though, now.
I'm working on it, bro. This software is fighting me. Oh, I'm still sharing. Let me stop sharing. Calls in another window.
Don't worry, it was fighting me this morning, too.
There we go.
It's like, oh, that's a nice 4K camera you got there. How about HD?
There. Can you see it? Yes?
No, I can.
All right, you can say it. Okay. He was in the Knights of Malta, KOM. So there's apparently a bunch of famous or semi-famous figures who were part of KOM who were involved in the UAP historical thing. He appeared on Art Bell's show at least 2 times. One time with Dr. John B. Alexander, who's a well-known figure in paranormal ufology and things like that. And Alexander backed up his service record. He said he had called people in DC and had checked telephone directories and whatnot. And that's recorded. I have the full transcripts on Medium now. Okay. And so now we know this is like a code, and we've just decoded part of it, a little part of it. Now we know that Corso is who he said he was. He was involved in some really interesting things. And we have chain of custody on the documents that show that. Okay, so that's probably the most important thing in this whole presentation, Sean. Okay, so now we're going to get to my favorite topic, which is Majestic 12. I love Majestic 12. I love researching anything related to this. So what I did is I bought the Majestic documents real fast. If anybody listening doesn't know what they are, these are a bunch of, in my opinion, leaked and faked and weird mystery documents from the 80s and 90s. And they were leaked or distributed to several individuals. Sometimes I think it was on undeveloped film or paperwork, whatever. And this caused quite a ruckus. And authors like Stanton Friedman spent years investigating them. Sometimes the documents were found in actually official archives. So I've been trying to track these things down. And I don't trust anything I find on the internet anymore because you just don't know. Like with AI and Photoshop, you never know what you're finding, right? It could be a legit doc somebody hacked up, or it could be from China or Russia or Iran. Who the hell knows, right? So what I've done is I've searched and searched and searched. And I finally found there was a physical printing of at least 100 of these pages of these documents by the Woods, father and son. And it's called the Majestic documents. And so I found the physical printing from 1998. And that's right around the time Corso was out too. And this is great because now I can compare those physical pages in the published book versus what's on the internet. And I am finding things that are missing. So what's on the internet is only a subset of what's in the book. And I'm like, wait, that's weird. And so anyway, I don't treat these as real. What I do is I treat these as pieces of information to be as hints, basically. It's like research hints. Like, okay, here we got Majestic 12 Project, first annual report. It was issued on a key date, September 26, 1947, by direct presidential directive. It's a 12-person panel. Dr. Vannevar Bush was the head. Notice we have an address for, you probably can't see this, but if you can, there's an address for the chairman, Dr. Vannevar Bush, at 4901 Hillbrook Lane. Turns out that was his address at the time. You can find this address if you search really, really hard for it in microfilm at the time. There's like 1 or 2 obscure newspaper articles. There's a phone number, Republic, that's capital RE, 6700, branch 5484. Well, that's Dr. Bush's phone number. Notice it's not in the normal way we have phone numbers today, right? Well, I'm not familiar with 40s phone numbers. I'm not an expert on that. So I started to read about that. And it turns out that's actually how you would call the Pentagon, or how you call, this number. Republic 6700 is what you'd say. And then once you got in that, you would go branch 5484. So I looked up in microfilm. I searched for that number and that branch, and it turns out that's a valid phone number at the time, or around that time. I found a classified ad listing for, I don't remember what it was, but I put it on X, and I think I put it on my Medium, of someone in the military. So that was a valid branch number. So whoever did this document, there's valid information on there. So anyway, it says here for the panel, a review of the president's special panel to investigate the capture, that's military terminology, of unidentified planform space vehicles. Notice that strange word, planform, by U.S. armed forces and agencies. So there's a lot of interesting wording in there. Anyway, that's what we're going to cover real fast in here is information that I've found about Dr. Bush, about the first person on there, General J. Lawton Collins, Deputy Chief of Staff, U.S. Army. Collins is an interesting figure. I had no idea who the hell Collins was. So that's what I started the research.
Real quick, does this Collins have anything to do with the Collins elite or anything like that?
I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I've heard many theories about the Collins elite, Collins radio. I didn't even think about that, by the way, putting the Collins link together with General Collins. But I don't think it's an accident that Collins is the first person listed here. And it's not sorted by last name. So, because there's a dude, Lieutenant General Lewis H. Brereton beneath him. So Collins, it turns out once you investigate Collins and see what he said right before Roswell, before Kenneth Arnold, June 24th, before the Morial incident, you'll know he's the right guy. He's the exact right guy. He's a big guy. So this is the second page in the book of the Majestic documents. So it says here, the aforementioned panel under the direct presidential directive signed on 26th of September 47. Okay, well, that's an interesting date. So I've been through the newspapers on that date and a day before and a day after trying to find anything significant that happened, especially in DC around that date, right? And I got this to emphasize to the audience, like, this has been a lot of work. I'm tired. This is extremely tiring research. Okay. Who's Dr. Vannevar Bush? He's the panel head. Most people probably today don't know who the hell he is. He was a very big guy. He was in charge of the first work on the new atomic bomb. He was the head of the OSRD. He was basically the head honcho guy involved in the U.S. military's, the U.S. government's scientific war effort during World War II and after.
He was also the founder of Raytheon, too.
Yes, founder of Raytheon. I have that in here. This guy was connected to everybody. This is the kind of guy in the early 50s, when the FBI would come to him, because he was also tapped by the FBI for security clearance investigations, right? And eventually they stopped going to him because eventually he just got pissed at him. He said, "Do you know who I am?" I have a quote, by the way, in FBI documents. I put that on X last night. "Do you know who I am? Like, do you know who? If you don't even know who I am, then get out of my face. Tell your boss to, go to hell." Yeah, he could just tell off the FBI. That's in the early 50s when the FBI was very powerful.
Why did they keep coming to him about, like, they were just...
when they wanted to give someone
investigations?
Yes, when they wanted to give...
They would come to him for individual security clearances, interviews.
They would go to him.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, this guy was high up. This is the head of MJ-12. Very powerful man. So, yeah, they would go just real fast. I've read this multiple times in FBI documents, declassified, where they're doing a security clearance investigation on blah, blah, blah. And they would go to him. And eventually he got tired of it. But that happened for years. Okay, so the first person on the panel is General J. Lawton Collins, considered top probability to succeed General Eisenhower. And so that's that's impressive. But if you go read what he said right before Roswell, right before the 1947 wave, he said, "Never again, if another war comes, will the U.S. have the time and space factor in its favor." He was talking about the Air Force and how incredibly important it was. And so was, by the way, Dr. Bush. Weeks before Roswell, they had a panel put together by the president about nuclear war, atomic age war. And it was pretty grim. It was very grim, actually, the articles. So weeks before the Majestic 12 panel, that's the kind of stuff they were looking at, as they were concerned about the United States being attacked in a sneak attack. They were concerned about, like, military warfare has changed because of planes and atomic weapons and missiles and bacteriological warfare, et cetera, right? So this is a big guy at the time. And I'll be honest, I've just started researching him, but this is what I'm finding right before Roswell was a picture that this would be actually the perfect Army guy to put at the beginning of this panel. He was the guy to consult, and he was on other panels right before this. So, yeah, and he was asked, like, "Hey, what would happen in the first few hours of the next war?" And he said, "We need to have trained men in every part of our country ready and able to meet disorder, sabotage, and even invasion." Attack, this is a quote, attack may come so swiftly and from so many directions that no standing army could assume this responsibility and still mount an offensive of significant proportions. So this was a thinker. This was one of their biggest thinkers of the era, military-wise, in the Army. Okay. This is the commission I was talking about. So this is week before Roswell. 2 panel members, Dr. Bush and General Collins, are quoted. Yeah, we just kind of covered this. So, and that's all throughout the newspapers. Okay. The day before the MJ panel, so September 25th, 1947, Dr. Bush is asked, this is a quote, was asked to accept appointment as head of the R&D board in the new National Defense Organization. Dr. Vannevar Bush was one of the founders of Raytheon. I put that on there. But there's the newspaper article there, and there's a picture of him. Bush is on the left. On the right is a famous guy named Secretary of Defense Forrestal. You probably recognize that name if you know much about ufology. Forrestal.
Yeah, was it really suicide, though?
Was it really suicide?
Really?
So there's Bush and Forrestal. By the way, this is the day before the MJ-12 panels put together. All right. Oh, that's interesting. We got more, though. Hold on. We got more. The same day as the MJ panel is formed, 9/26/47, major newspapers announced President Truman has appointed Dr. Bush to, quote, direct scientific war. What kind of panel would you probably hold on a day like that? Well, there you go. The first that will be the number one topic is the retrievals. So it's all very interesting. Okay, so there's something else, and other researchers have found this, and I found this independently. So Bush was fond of these 12 individual panels, a mixture of scientists, civilians, Navy officers, Army officers. And it's well known, during World War II and right after, he would have panels like this. So it's plausible. And so this is in a thesis, Origin and Significance of the Atomic Energy Act of 46. That's where I first found it. But there's other researchers who found other things about these 12-person panels. And one thing I noticed is that they don't always have to be exactly 12. Sometimes it would be 13, things like that. Okay, another example. The Joint Research and Development Board established after the end of the war. There you go. Another panel, 12 people. Physicists, biologists, common. Okay, so I was actually searching for...
Hey, can you go back? Can you go back for a second? Does that say William Shockley?
Yeah, that's physicist William Shockley. That's right.
Isn't he the inventor of the transistor?
If I remember right, yeah, he was involved in that. Yeah.
I think he invented it.
That's all really interesting. It is very, that's very interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Of course, they said that they planted a bunch of stuff.
Isn't there a theory that the crash was at Roswell seeded transistors into society?
Yeah, there absolutely is. Yeah, there's been others that researched this.
Did you notice this when you were going through the?
No, I didn't actually. I didn't pay attention. I saw Alvarez. I didn't. Yeah, it's a good question. Why is Shockley
that's
on there?
Really interesting.
I didn't know that.
Anyway,
I didn't. That's a great question. Why was Shockley in 46 appearing with Bush? That's a great find. I have to research this more.
Actually, let me just go to ChatGPT and confirm that he invented the transistor.
Yeah, Shockley. I recognize that name. Yeah, and this particular thing I have here on the slides is from a chronology by George Eberhardt, a professional librarian. He has a massive PDF. It's called UFOs and Intelligence. It's amazing. He is a great researcher. Okay, so moving forward while you're doing that.
All right, I know I got it. All right,
you got it?
So the wow. Okay, the transistor was invented. Can you guess what year?
48, right? 49?
It was invented in 1947.
Oh, that's right, 47.
Labs.
Yeah.
At Bell Labs by 3 scientists.
That's the narrative.
John Bardeen.
Holy shit.
Walter Brattain and William Shockley.
Yeah. So,
are those other 2 names? Do they pop up at all?
No, I don't recognize the other names that you mentioned on here.
Okay.
But this is only at panel 12. So basically, listen, what we're basically seeing here is that key figures in enormous technological developments were on these 12-person panels headed by Dr. Bush, who was at the center of everything involved with UAPs at the time, apparently. It's all spooky how it all links together. As I do this research, it's like all the history is all there and we just need to decode it. It's already in the databases. It's already in the microfilm. We just need to recover history. It all happened. I'm personally convinced that there was an MJ12 panel. I say that because I've deeply researched certain pages, right, from the Majestic documents like this one. And every time I research it, I find something interesting and new. It's almost like if it was faked by an absolute expert who had access to things in the 90s or 80s that would be virtually impossible to have unless they were an intelligence agency with access to like everything from the era. And we're talking super obscure information. So, by the way, Oppenheimer was on this panel. This was the highest of high here, you know, moving forward. Okay. That's fascinating. Shockley on that. I didn't even notice that. Good eye there. Okay. We covered this. All right. So this is the next thing. I've been researching Jack Parsons just for fun. I have a biography on him here. He was the rocket guy. He was involved in occult stuff. He's just a famous figure. And what I kept stumbling on were newspaper articles. And it turns out the history of Jack Parsons is not complete because I'm finding newspaper articles with him involved in like really high-end aeronautical R&D, wind tunnel stuff. Like he was the head of things in 48. Like Jack Parsons was a connected guy. And it's interesting. I find these articles and then I look at the biographies and I don't see those entries in there. So I think we're finding new things that have just been digitized in the last 5 or 10 years. But anyway, this isn't about Parsons, but it is about NACA, the predecessor in some ways to NASA. And so if you look at the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics at Moffett Field, California, Ames Aeronautical Laboratory, that's where I believe from memory, that's where Parsons was involved in it for a bit. Look at the list of people. You'll find that there's Dr. Bush, Condon, Vandenberg, Doolittle, Bronk. Now, if you know anything about the UAP topic, you'll recognize all of those names. Every single one of them is either said to be or was historically involved in the UAP thing. Condon's famous for the Condon Report. I think that was around 68, 69. And that was a whitewash, a cover-up, basically, where basically they wrote a bunch of stuff about UFOs and then they put Condon's sloppy summary at the beginning and declared the whole thing was over and they shut down Project Blue Book. It was just a cover-up. And so actually it turns out...
Case closed.
Yeah, case closed. Exactly. And by the way, everybody at the time was saying that as well. And some scientists
not this one, but that was like the Air Force's thing later on. Yeah. But I'm just saying that as you know.
Yeah. Well, in the newspapers at the time, what was leaking constantly, scientists would quit and they would say, this is fake. This is not being ran correctly. But what I'm noticing, though, is that this crew is tight and they were involved in super high-end, high-tech efforts like NACA. So this is from the National Archives in San Francisco. And I found Parsons was actually referenced on one of these documents. That's how I found this, actually. And then I noticed that all of these famous figures who were involved in UAPs, either officially or unofficially, were included. And so this is only, by the way, 1 year after Roswell incident as well, July 14th, 48, July 13th or so. So this is 1 year later. The crew is still together. And these are very obscure papers, by the way. It took me a while. I had to find them through looking for Parsons. Okay. So another thing I found, this is an anomaly to me because I've been through literally like tens of thousands of newspaper clippings just for 47. There's that many. There's a lot for Roswell. It was a huge, not just Roswell, but the wave as well. So Bush wrote, and on the right, he wrote, "The speed and surprise with which great damage could be done to our fleet at Pearl Harbor is only a mild warning of what might happen in the future." So that's Dr. Vannevar Bush, Director of Office of Scientific Research and Development, OSRD. That's in 45. Okay, so he's taking it seriously. On the left, we have him quoted in July 6th, a couple days before Roswell, 47. He's like, it's just an illusion. Wait a second. That makes no sense. If your country's being overflown by weird objects, and we're sending up planes, it's all over the newspapers, to go trace them. And they're apparently being spotted on radar, according to later new revelations. And they're being spotted by military people, and they're spotted landing, and it's all over the newspapers. Like, after the lesson of Pearl Harbor, you would never say that. That's insanity. That's insane. So he was lying. He had to lie. He had an AEC clearance. He was the guy consulted to give the clearances. There's no way he's telling the truth. They're not just illusions. It's completely unscientific. And it's not rational. And no matter what it was, you had to have taken it seriously. And like they knew, my opinion is they knew by this point, at least one of the crash sites was already being recovered. They knew they had to cover it up. Okay, I was covering this earlier. This is how powerful Bush was. This is in 1954. This is from FBI declassified documents. He said to the agent, he says, "Hey, do you know who I am?" And the agent gave a negative answer. And then Bush said, "How can you conduct an investigation if you don't know all about me? I'm a busy man. You ought to know all about me before you come here to interview me. I don't have time to answer your questions. You can go back and tell your boss that." So this is a powerful guy. This is Hoover-era, right? Like he just told a G-man to go F off. It's a powerful man. Okay, this shows that Dr. Bush was a confidential informant for atomic energy contacts. I think this is from his FBI file, which has been around for decades. And it's a huge file. You know, I doubt anybody's been through the whole thing and really in any detail who understood UAPs, at least. Yeah, so it turns out Bush was not happy with Condon. And this is in the early 50s, I think. Late 40s, early 50s. And he called him a bit of a damn fool. And I don't know who would disagree with that after the Condon report whitewashed. So why would you assign a bit of a damn fool, at least according to Bush, to the Condon report, unless the conclusion was preordained? Yeah, so even MJ-12 didn't like the guy, Condon. Okay. So now we're going to get to security clearances. So I stumbled on this all by accident. I first stumbled onto a guy named Fred Chrisman, who was a famous 20th century figure, apparently involved in maybe in the JFK assassination as one of the tramps. And that's led to a flood of investigations, official ones, about this guy, Fred Chrisman. It turns out Chrisman was an OSS guy. He was an Army CIC guy. He was like a James Bond kind of guy. He was in the Army Air Force. When he was younger, he was quite capable. And he was a good disruption agent, is how I would describe this guy. And so he was brought in to help disrupt or contain the Morion incident that occurred right before and during the Kenneth Arnold situation. So during the wave, he was brought in. And it turns out that in the JFK record system, we now have corroboration that he did have, and he got an AEC, or at least applied for an AEC security clearance right after Roswell, which makes no sense. That destroys all the narratives about the Morion incident, completely blows them up. He's not a hoaxer. No hoaxer goes to apply for security clearance. You know, but it was a rush security clearance, and Guy Hodel was involved in it. I've covered that in your show previously, and also at the Contact in the Desert. But anyway, I discovered this by accident. Detlev Bronk, who was one of the guys on the MJ-12 panel, actually, if I remember right. Detlev Bronk. Let's go look. Yeah, Bronk. Chairman, National Research Council. There he is. He got a security clearance. So the date that he applied is fascinating. The dates listed are July 3rd to the July 18th, 1947, with a specific date listed of July 8th, 1947. July 8th, 1947 is actually the peak of the wave. July 7th and July 8th, according to multiple.
That's the Roswell crash. That's
correct,
when the Roswell crash happened.
The Roswell crashes. There were multiple crash sites. And one of them was earlier than this. So one of them was early, like the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, approximately. And I'm not an expert on Roswell, but you can go read Friedman's books, Stanton Friedman, for that. And you can see there's multiple crash sites. One was near Corona. I think he has a book, Crash at Corona. Okay, so here we got a guy, Detlev Wolf Bronk. The security matter C in the 49 would be communism, probably. They're just doing an investigation of this guy, and then they're talking about, hey, we have an Atomic Energy Act applicant, paperwork here, and here's the date. We were researching him in early July 47. Well, wait a second. If they had a crash on the 4th, they had a crash site with occupants roughly in the 3rd to the 8th, and they're rushing a bunch of people in. Who knows, right? It's an interesting timing. But anyway, Bronk had an AEC clearance, or at least applied for one, and they got one. So he's a major figure in history. So in terms of chain of custody, this is a FOIA request. So this is a very strong chain of custody. We have the official FOIA paperwork. It goes again through John Greenwald Jr. at the Black Vault, who's done a remarkable job getting all this stuff, a game-changing job. Yeah, so that we know this happened, and the date is spooky. Okay, this is the chain of custody. This is the the FOIA documentation for Bronx security clearance AEC, signed by David M. Hardy, section chief, blah, 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 U.S. Department of Justice, FBI. Okay, now we get to Hynek, famous figure, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, an astronomer. He was involved in Project Blue Book, and then he had a change of heart years later and started to talk more openly about the situation and got really serious into his research of UAPs. So this is interesting because the date, he applied for an Atomic Energy Act security clearance. And by the way, this is higher than top secret. This is the atomic energy system had its own security clearances, and they would investigate, from my understanding, they would investigate the AEA people way more than just regular secret, top secret, whatever. They would really dig in. They'd had to. This is atomic secrets, or atomic grade secrets. So the first question I had was, well, is this date 4952? Is that a significant date in history? Why? Why is he applying around that date? Oh, it turns out Project Blue Book was officially established, according to French researchers, on 41052, and it was announced on 41252. And that's from BU, RR0 website. He has a big chronology on there. Okay. And that's plausible. I searched web newspapers for that. And that's plausible. So here's the deal. It's a key date. Right as Project Blue Book's coming up, we have a key individual involved in it, J. Allen Hynek, who was getting an AEA security clearance, atomic level security clearance. Why would a gentleman investigating weather balloons and geese need an AEC clearance? Can anybody answer that? Can you answer that, Sean?
It has something to do with swamp gas, I think.
I think so. Okay.
There's
now we're going to
some
get
radioactive swamp gas, maybe. Who knows?
Yes. No, was it geese with fungal glow? That's what's Menzel.
Radioactive.
Yes,
radioactive,
very radioactive geese. Okay, so we're going to get in the documents where the chain of custody isn't quite as strong. So I'm still working on these. I like to have chain of custody, but for what it's worth, these have been declassified for decades. They're old. So here we have, but it turns out either they weren't digitized until relatively recently, or nobody just found them, right? So this is part of archive.org's NSIA FBI files and National Security Archive. And it's just many hundreds of documents on there, PDFs, whatnot. Okay. So this was declassified in 2009, and it shows very clearly subject Donald Howard Menzel, consultant, National Security Agency, Washington, D.C., security of government employees, blah, blah, blah. Now, we have corroboration on this. There are other NSA.gov, like strong chain of custody documents showing that he was crypto cleared by name with his address on there. So we know for sure. Now we have triple corroboration. We've got this document, and we've got one or two others. I think it's one other with 2 hits. And then we have Stanton Friedman's work where he actually went to Menzel's family. Now, why is this important? Menzel was the biggest debunker. He was the Mick West of UAPs in the 50s and 60s. And he's also the guy who was responsible for apparently destroying logbooks, astronomical logbooks, and destroying plates, or preventing the astronomical plates from being saved. It's called the Menzel Gap. That's what the astronomers call it. Well, the dude behind the Menzel Gap, the dude behind leading the debunking charge, was a consultant for the NSA. Now, to be involved with this kind of work, you would need a very high level clearance. Well, he was crypto cleared. What other clearances did he have? I don't know. We're eventually going to find out. All this stuff just flooding out. Like, the government just declassifies documents all the time, right? It's just, okay. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. He had an Atomic Energy Act investigation clearance too. I don't know what date, but he had an AEA-A investigation. Oh, Atomic Energy Act. Cool. So now we know, but he had a bit of a background, but that's okay. I guess they cleared them. Okay, so now we're going to get to the point of this, of my research here. We have a cluster that's fascinating, and I believe I'm the first to figure this out in terms of the cluster and the scale of it. UFO adjacent figures and atomic ultra-sensitive clearance ecosystem. We have Bush, Dr. Bush, Bronk, Hynek, Condon, Chrisman, Menzel, Sagan, June Crane, Corso, Robert Odin, Friedman, and maybe, and it's a big maybe, Einstein. If Einstein did have clearances, they were limited. And that's according to recent research. There's a book that I've been reading, The Einstein File, J. Edgar Hoover's Secret War Against the World's Most Famous Scientists, at the very bottom there. So Einstein actually did have a clearance through the Navy for certain types of, quote, explosives work, unquote. So the Army had denied him, though, because of his background. And by the way, Einstein, supposedly was witnessed at one of the Roswell-related events. If maybe not. But I just put him on there because he did have a clearance and is not well known of some sort. Anyway, but ignoring Einstein, going back up, all these figures, like anybody who's familiar with the history of UAPs would recognize all of these names. They all had some connection in some way to the UAP situation, and they were all witnesses to something or were involved in key reports or debunkers or said to have been involved in autopsies. Well, it's really fascinating. This whole field is loaded to the hilt with people with security clearances. And that's interesting. I didn't realize that. And a lot of this is new. Like, we're just finding these declassified documents. Like, I think the most recent declassified document is Menzel, 2009. So the history's changing as these documents are declassified, which I find fascinating. Robert O'Dean was an interesting guy who was active in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and he was interviewed by Art Bell a couple times. He was a U.S. Army guy, if I remember right. Yeah. And he had a NATO cosmic clearance, which sounds ridiculous. What is a cosmic clearance? It sounds like something, he made up. Well, it turns out that's real. That NATO has a different security clearance names. And I found many hits for that in newspapers. Like the name cosmic, or the phrase cosmic clearance. He was at SHAPE. So SHAPE debunked him. They're like, no. There was no report that Dean had seen here about UFOs. But yeah, he worked for us. He's in our records. So that's an official acknowledgement from SHAPE.NATO's historian, their official historian, that yes, we found records that he was here. He served. Well, he had a high clearance, and he said that he had seen a document, I think he called it an assessment, about the situation, UFOs were flying overhead and causing security panics and whatever, and about the occupants and all that stuff, whatever, And so I'm not saying what he's saying is real. I don't know, but he was there and he had a clearance. So he went on, I'll just pop him on the list. Okay. So now, is there any corroboration from this in the modern era? Well, it turns out, yes, there is. And Sean, you were there too. So remember when Carl Nell was given a talk about the disclosure timeline?
Yeah, okay. I remember.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he said that the Atomic Energy Act of 1954 covers UAP secrets. I have a quote from here. It was from a transcript I found. He said that some UAP records are exempt from mandatory declassification review under the Atomic Energy Act of 54, which is the follow-up to the AEA of 46. So wait a second. Why would geese and balloons fall under the Atomic Energy Act of 54? Why would there be an atomic? They're very dangerous.
They're very dangerous. The geese, they're very harmful.
Yeah. And so this is a slide. There's a video, official video on YouTube. I think I linked to it. Yeah. From Soul Foundation, where he mentions they're exempt under the Atomic Energy Act of 54. Okay. So this is controversial. Some people just don't care. I don't even know if we have any time to cover this. So how are we doing on time, Sean?
We're good. We have maybe 4 minutes.
Okay, I'll just go through this really fast. I started a new thread with OpenAI GPT-5. I showed it a bunch of transcripts. Farah, the producer or director of the Disclosure documentary that just came out, and I showed interviews with him. I showed him Corso, verified transcripts, speaker attributed, Dean, et cetera, et cetera. I just showed the AI, like, hey, check all these transcripts out. Here's my slides. Here's the National Security Council docs. I showed it RCR versions of them. What do you think? Fresh context, no special prompting. Just get a, what does it say? Here's its final synthesis. And declassified U.S. government records demonstrate that beginning in mid-47, individuals centrally involved in UFO investigation, management, or public dismissal were repeatedly granted or vetted for atomic tier security access governed by the Atomic Energy Act. This clearance pattern, confirmed in at least one case by documented Q clearance and NDA, indicates that aspects of the UFO problem were handled within nuclear-sensitive security regimes rather than conventional aviation or intelligence channels. The most parsimonious explanation is that the phenomenon was perceived as intersecting energy, materials, or strategic risk domains severe enough to warrant sustained legally enforced secrecy and public narrative management. And there's the variant. I fed it, another transcript, and it gave me another variant of that. Okay, so what we do have, this is the evidence that we do have. Notice it says this is hard evidence. We have law, Atomic Energy Act 1946-54 to UAPDA, explicit congressional declaration that some UAP records evade MDR due to the AEA. That's Grush's testimony. I think that's referring to that. Carl Nell's public confirmation of that legal framework. Law and code what the state fears most, not what it casually believes. Has consistency across decades. Okay. All right, I obviously have a repeated slide. All right, I have to fix that. Anyway, I threw this in at the last minute. Here's the documents that we got. We have AEC, RDQ clearance paperwork. We have NDAs, June Crane. And by the way, we actually have her signed NDA. She was so angry at the Air Force in that case closed thing that you mentioned earlier in the 90s, their cover up of the Roswell incident. She was angry. She was one of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base clerk stenographers. We have an affidavit from her, a legal affidavit. We have signed NDA. We've got a lot of stuff and have a chain of custody through a detective. So we have FBI files. We have CIA routing files. We have NSA contractor records, NATO cosmic confirmation. These are primary sources. We have testimony, Corso, Dean, Hynek, Menzel, modern whistleblowers, Grush, Nell. Okay. We have consistency across time from 47 all the way up to 2020s. The same legal and security machinery keeps reappearing. This is extraordinarily rare unless the underlying driver is real. Okay, why qualitative Bayesian inference is the correct tool? It's a tool I've been using to try to reason in this domain. It's a very fuzzy analog domain. And in this particular way of reasoning, it's used in court cases a lot. You come up with different hypotheses. And I've covered this on your show previously. And you come up with all your evidence, and then you start rating the evidence based off each hypothesis. And from that, you can kind of get an idea like how the different hypotheses are weighted against each other to try to figure out, okay, which direction are we going here in terms of potential possible conclusions? So hypothesis A would be they were trivial misidentifications, balloons, swamp gas, or foreign aircraft. I believe that would be the null hypothesis, right? Predictions under A, standard military classification, eventual declassification, no atomic law involvement, no AEC Q clearances, no statutory capture under AEA, no congressional admission of oversight failure. Observed data contradicts A repeatedly. However, hypothesis B, UFOs, UAPs involve phenomena intersecting energy materials or physics domains with severe proliferation risk. Predictions under B, Atomic Energy Act control, RDQ clearances, long-lived secrecy, FOIA, MDR failure, blah, 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 blah. Observed data matches all observations. And keep in mind, I just said, hey, use qualitative Bayesian analysis, figure this out. Okay. And what it was saying is the prior probability of hypothesis B may have been low in 47, but now that we just keep raising that probability and lowering the probability that it was just all balloons and swamp gas. B dominates the hypothesis space even without physical artifacts. We don't need physical artifacts to know that something's up, something big. The key insight is laws don't hallucinate. People can lie, witnesses can embellish, memories can fail, but statutory frameworks that sustain across 70 years do not arise from nothing. The Atomic Energy Act is the strongest possible signal of perceived risk in the U.S. system. The U.S. government doesn't apply it accidentally, casually, or maintain it without cause. So anyway, here's its synthesis. Even in the absence of recovered materials or biological evidence, the legal, documentary, and institutional record demonstrates that UAP-related information has been consistently treated as atomic energy sensitive under U.S. law since the late 40s. Qualitative Bayesian inference strongly favors the hypothesis that the phenomena was perceived to involve energy, materials, or physics domains with extraordinary strategic and proliferation risk, rendering conventional explanations insufficient. And so it's on this thread I was on. It's like, we don't need aliens. We don't need a body. We don't need MJ-12, actually. We don't need leaps of faith. All we need are law, documents, behavior, and inference. So that's my presentation I put together last night.
All right. Any final words for the audience?
Well, if you've gotten this far, thank you for listening. Sorry for the misspelling. I did my best. This was been a lot of work. But thanks a lot, Sean, for inviting me on too. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Rich, I think this is extremely illuminating. And even like some of the random synchronicities we had in terms of like William Shockley, the fact that he was on that panel of 12. Was it MJ-12?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I didn't catch that.
It's a little weird. And he invented a transistor with two others in December 1947.
Yeah.
6 months to...
By the way, the Majestic documents state that they got what they describe as ICs. So the Majestic documents in Corso...
integrated circuits when you say ICs.
Yeah,
right?
integrated circuits, exactly. And Corso said that they had discussed in the military, they were scared of ICs. They were like, if we unleash this technology, what's going to happen? Are they going to put these things in our brains? They were concerned about brain computer interfaces, BCIs. They were really worried about that. And they were like, oh, this is scary technology. Remember, vacuum tubes were like high tech in the 50s, you know?
It's still scary technology.
Yeah.
To this day, it's still scary.
Yeah.
So, all right, my friend.
I appreciate it.
An absolute pleasure. And talk soon.
Thanks, man. See you later.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you could get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of a expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.